recording. Hello, everyone. I'm Megan Moody. I am the Immersive Technologies Librarian for Studio X, a hub for extended reality at the University of Rochester. Thank you so much for joining us. This series is a collaboration between the Gergen Institute for Data Science and the River Campus Libraries and has been supported generously by the National Science Foundation as part of the interdisciplinary graduate training in science technology and applications of augmented and virtual reality at the University of Rochester. I am so pleased to and would like to thank Stephen Christian for joining us today. Stephen is a visual artist living in Portland, Oregon. His journey as an artistic creator is especially interesting. He turned to art and comics and developing for mobile devices after suffering a football injury while he was an undergraduate at the University of Hawaii. Now, as the founder of Iltopia Studios, Stephen aims to create content that reflects his environment and empowers people from his community. A few of his projects include AR graphic novels that promote inclusive literacies and learning, an AR app that allowed him to install 30-foot memorial busts of George Floyd around Portland, among many other projects. He also works as a teaching artist and mentor in the Portland Public Schools and the Portland Community College. And Stephen advocates for lowering the bar of entry for emerging technologies, a space that has evolved largely without the contributions or influence from Black and Brown communities. His work empowers individuals within these communities to express themselves through creativity, art, and technology. On top of all of this, he is currently pursuing medical school with the aspiration of using his creative and technical skills to combat health disparities in marginalized communities. Today, he'll be talking about why an interdisciplinary approach is so important for innovation, creativity, and emerging tech. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat. We'll have a Q&A at the end of this. And then lastly, this session is being recorded and will be available later on the Studio X website. And with that, I will turn it over to Stephen.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the lovely introduction. Glad to be here. Can everyone hear me just fine? Perfect, perfect. And yeah, so it's great to be, speaking with you all, especially those that are on the East Coast. I am currently in Portland, as she said, and so it's like 7:30 in the morning, and so my girlfriend is still asleep, and it should be interesting to see what my day looks like since I started, so much earlier than she did, and so with that, I will try to. It's funny that I work in emerging tech, but like PowerPoint is always a hassle when you're presenting. I feel like that just, no matter how far you get in technology, there's always things that just test your resolve. And so you should be able to see the slide deck, right? Perfect, perfect. And as I say that, my girlfriend's, her alarm just went off. So it's like, it looks like she's starting the day. So my name is Steve. I will be talking about interdisciplinary approaches to problem solving, and particularly with innovation in emerging tech. And interestingly enough, what I do is I consider myself a content creator. And so what I do is I just come up with ideas. I do whatever process is required to manifest those ideas and put those out into the world. And as a result, it sort of opens up and creates more opportunities for myself and for others. And so a lot of it has been focused on me personally, sort of like rewriting the narrative of what young Black men in America look like and do. For me, I guess I didn't really come up, set myself up for success in that area because, I sort of went the stereotypical route, right? Like, played football in my life, and then that got me into college, and then from there sort of like tried to go to the NFL, then I got injured, and then I was sort of sleeping on couches and stuff. And so from there, it really forced me to start thinking outside the box, because in many ways I was unhireable in a lot of different areas, and it was just very bleak opportunities, and so from there I just sort of had to just think about stuff and create, and from there, it really sort of allowed me to create a career for myself. And so in terms of like innovation, like I probably wouldn't be in the position that I'm at now if I didn't innovate, because literally all the stuff that I'm doing now, I joke around about with my girlfriend where all the stuff that I'm doing now are just because I just came up with the idea and then I just sent out a cold, like a whole bunch of cold emails, and then people just responded. And you know, if people rejected me, then I just send another 100 emails out, you know, and that's just essentially how it worked. And so in many ways, you have to be, you just have to just sort of pursue ideas and wait for people to catch up to those ideas. And so what do? Right? Like I am, and actually let me move this to the side. Okay, so people can still see that. Cool. Yeah. So what I do is, you know, I am a retired football player. So I played football for 12 years. I played 6 years in college. I also had 2 hip surgeries, and so I also overcame, uh, you know, debilitating injuries to continue playing, which probably isn't good for my health. But hey, what can you do? I'm also an animator, a college instructor, a STEAM educator. So science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. You could sort of, you know, put a slash math slash manufacturing, because I do a lot of production as well. Comic creation. I'll be a medical student in fall, so that'll be interesting. Youth mentor, writer, full stack augmented reality mobile developer is sort of the title that I took on last year as I got deeper into emerging tech. Innovator, community builder, podcaster. I'm a radio host. Whenever, you know, we get back in the studio, web developer, and I also like snowboard and boogie board. And so those are like the things that I typically do on a regular basis. And you know, the lines get very blurred when it comes to just the things that I enjoy doing and can do. And so I really try to push the envelope of like what I'm capable of doing. And do. And so with it, you know, many of people know me for the work that I've done over the past year. And that includes just, you know, stuff in the arts. So, you know, using animation and tying it to physical products that people can buy and actually, uh, you know, expand their reality of, you know, what is possible. And so that means just taking your phone and unlocking unlockable stuff within art. Um, Other things are just, you know, bringing characters to life, and particularly Black characters, and allowing you to see them in a new way and hopefully identify with them in a new way. And using that to change your perspective of what Black creativity looks like. And then more importantly, I'm, you know, like many, you know, young Black millennials, the like dance culture and all those different things have influenced me in my life. And so I see that there's a lot of opportunities in that space to show what is possible in the arts, in integrating technology into it. And so a lot of the stuff that I do as an artist is really focused on incorporating technology and innovating. And so for me, I'm a problem solver. I develop skills, you know, along the way to address specific problems. Many would say call that a generalist, and partly because, you know, for my experiences, I've had to overcome obstacles with very little resources. And so, you know, I would say that I'm a byproduct of essentially the internet generation, where people were more likely to just Google something rather than actually, you know, actually like talk to people. And from where I'm from, the stuff that I was interested in, I actually could not talk to anybody to explore the things that I wanted to explore, learn the things that I wanted to learn. And so because of that, really had to I really had to just look things up and build community online that goes beyond my geographic location. Uh, that that means that one, you stand out, but also it becomes a solo journey for many people, where you're innovating and you're inspiring others, but the people that you look up to, you can't physically, you know, be in the same location as them. And I think that just speaks volumes for just you know, the nature of innovation and the nature of the work that like me and other people do, where there'll probably be one person in one city of one state, and then the next person will probably end up being in another country. And so over the past year, I see that like a lot of the conversations I have with people that I sort of look up to are in like Denmark and Greenland and places like that, which is pretty interesting. I never thought I would be talking to people and building connections that way, but such is life. And so what I do is I essentially, because I have such a diverse array of experiences, what I do is I create solutions by pulling from those experiences. And so many of the solutions that I come up with are really just things that like speak to me as a person personally. And so often you'll come across, and I'll sort of gloss on that later, but the things that I would come up with, another person that sort of does the type of work that I do probably won't come up with that same solution. And it's just because it's very subjective. And so for me, it sort of, when I think about problem solving, I always look at it through the lens of interdisciplinary studies, the concept of Afrofuturism, and then just the core concept of innovation. And so they overlap in many ways, but there's very distinct sort of categories that these all sort of align with. And so innovation, for the most part, for those that don't know what the actual definition of it is, innovation is just taking an idea and then making it a practical reality. And so when people refer to innovation, it's really just saying like, I had this idea and this is what I did with it to manifest something. And so I would argue that in order to be an innovator, you have to actually create something that's practical or tangible. Otherwise, it's just an experiment. And you could say that like experiments are, can be practical and stuff like that. But from my experience, the stuff that's experimental are the things that like still require innovation. And so Afrofuturism, Afrofuturism is something that like me as a Black person, I really appreciate and identify with, but it goes beyond just like my Black identity. It really focuses on imagining a future through a Black cultural lens. And what that means is that Black cultural lenses do not exclude Black people from the innovations that Black people have had and made in society, whether it be in the arts and technology, all those things. And so we're seeing a resurgence of like, Black history being more mainstream because Black inventors have been pivotal in the advancements in American society. The problem is, if you look at history books, the only time you see Black people is in slave movies and stuff. And so Afrofuturism says, no, yes, there's slavery, but then post-slavery and in modern society, Black people have contributed in these impactful ways. Or if you take out Black people, you take out that innovation. And that's antithetical to what we're just sort of seeing right now, or just what we've seen in the past. And so Afrofuturism, sort of asks this question of what if Black people were never slaves? What if Black people got reparations? What if Black people got this? What if just addressing that what if encourages you to unchain your mind from what's happening right now and actually use speculative fiction and just explore things in a different way, expand your mind. And so I think that just the whole concept of Afrofuturism really encourages you to ask what if. And I think that that really carries over into how to approach interdisciplinary, how to approach something through an interdisciplinary lens. And, how do you even start to like innovate or even want to innovate? And so with the, innovations and Black people in this country are nuanced and also pivotal, right? Like we all know of Missy Elliott from all the music videos, but what she did was she actually redefined what the identity of Blackness in pop culture was, where, it used to be just, shoot 'em up, bang, bang. And now you could actually talk about things and explore different ideas through sound and through costume design. We all know Grace Jones, right? Like modern ideas of fashion and sexuality and femininity and beauty were redefined by like the work that she did, and in many ways, when we're talking about technology, these ideas and the manifestation of those ideas and the power that those ideas have when they're manifested, that is the use of technology. And so often we think of like AR and VR and coding and all that. But culturist technology is one of the things that that really stands out and is actually really used. It's just not highlighted and glossed over as much as it should be. We know Garrett Morgan, who essentially saw an idea and said, hey, I saw this, I witnessed this accident. What if there was a warning sign, on traffic lights to mitigate these accidents? Just exploring that what if organically and then creating something from it, innovating from those ideas. And then Will.i.am was one of the pivotal people that got me into the work that I'm doing, which is AR comics. He's works in sound. He does a lot of cultural stuff. He's interested in technology. All he did was say, what if I combined everything into a book format to get people to open up books and identify with things in a new way? And so he created the first like mainstream graphic novel with Marvel. Put an asterisk there because they didn't really market it the way that they could have to sort of expand that. But the work that he did really inspired me because it shows that a book has value beyond just the text and beyond just the pictures. You can actually experience it in an innovative way. And so for artists, particularly Black artists, I think a lot of the stuff that he does is really applicable to a lot of the things that we currently have access to. And so, interdisciplinary approaches is an interesting concept because it's really forcing you to approach things through a specific lens to address specific problems. And so what you do is you essentially pull from a variety of experiences that you have to develop a solution. And that solution is very subjective and it's very pertinent to the specific problem that you're trying to address. And so very, very likely that the problem that you have or the solution you came up with for one problem won't carry over to another one, but you can take those insights to develop another solution. And what that requires is essentially for you to think outside the box. And so I mentioned Afrofuturism and sort of being antithetical or an affront to Western beliefs in society. So what we know as a society in America is that we tend to compartmentalize things, right? And the big thing is talking about work-life balance, where we have our work life, we have our home life, we have our social life. Those are all just boxes that we're compartmentalizing things in. When we're dealing with problems don't care about boxes. They could care less about any of that stuff, right? They just exist, they manifest, they perpetuate disparities. And so the idea that we have a box for education, our family, our art, math, science, sports, friends, science, all those things, interdisciplinary approaches means take rid of those boxes and just put those in a list. And so you prioritize what those things are to you, and then you pull from those experiences to solve that problem. So some things require you to have a background in education. Maybe you like science, and this one thing that you just do as a scientist, you can approach with your art. For me, I'm very formulaic. And so even though I approach things creatively, I like to have formulas. And so my math background really influences how efficient I am with my art and my creative practice. And so that could actually create a lot of different things. And I think that carries over to my comics. It carries over into the business that I have focused on making comics. And then eventually, I'm able to connect with my friends because I do the work that I do. And so it's a very nuanced way to bridge the gaps between all your different boxes to where there aren't boxes. It's just a summation of you as a whole. And I think that this really speaks to sort of the trend to go look at things holistically. And so you could say that essentially Afrofuturism and interdisciplinary studies is just a way to approach things holistically rather than in sort of compartments that force us to stress ourselves out a lot more than we probably should. And so what do these things have to do with problem solving, right? Problems that we have, they're really nuanced and they perpetuate disparities. And sometimes you really need to think outside the box to just come up with those solutions. But more importantly, like these solutions that, or these problems that we're experiencing, we have life experiences and stories that go along with defining what that problem is. And so with those life experiences come insights into why those problems exist. And the big thing is why those problems exist. Because when a problem is perpetuated, it's because we don't have a solution that addresses the why. And so for a variety of things like your skills, your hobbies, all the things that uh, make up your interests, that even go beyond just your profession or your major, those are things that also have value, and those are the things that get you over that hump to address the why. And so for me, because I'm sort of formulaic in things, it's I like to try to figure out approaches to things. And so to approach something through an interdisciplinary lens, you essentially, you notice a problem that persists, and it's often something that have a personal experience to, and then you reflect and explore that idea because you have a personal connection to it and you have a background that relates to it. And um, you know the things that lead to your experiences, the things that you notice, are the things that lead you to the why and give you those insights. And so because you live the life that you live and you sort of exist with that problem, you have a personal connection to it, and you also are just close to it. It's really hard for you to take a step back from it. And so the things that you notice are going to be the things that make the power of an interdisciplinary approach more impactful to coming up with a solution. And this goes beyond just technology. I mean, it goes beyond technology. It goes beyond everything. But this is your connection to the problem is what allows you to innovate in those areas. And so the thing is that people are able to recognize the problem, and people are able to define the problem, and they may be able to notice the why. But the problem is that people don't often pull from successful approaches that they had in other areas of their life. And so what they will sort of shut down and say, like, okay, the stuff that I did at work does not apply to me at home, and the stuff that I do at home doesn't apply to me at work, when that can't be farther from the truth. And so when you start to pull and be open to pulling from those successful approaches that you have in other areas into the areas that have problems, then that's where you start to address the solutions and come up with solutions. And so once you start to be open to that, then it's really just coming up with that what if, creating a hypothesis. It could be informal or formal. I do a lot of informal stuff, but coming up with a hypothesis, putting it on paper, and then just testing the approach out, and then documenting and sharing it. Because I think that piece in and of itself of documentation and sharing it, whether it's a YouTube video or a blog post, or just a conversation with somebody, like those things are the things that really get it to the next step. And that furthers the innovation, because you're able to build a community. And so often you're not only approaching things and exploring things that you have interest in and that you're passionate about, but you're also building a team of collaborators to help you explore that even further. And so essentially you use people as resources as well. And that's just a skill that people naturally develop as they try to address problems in these particular areas. And so, I have a formula, patent pending, which is sort of the problem, something that you notice, the connection, the personal story connected to that problem, the insights that you have. So from experiencing the problem firsthand over time, and then accomplishment. So the process you use to be successful in other areas of life. And then from there, you just explore that what if. And so all the four things prior to the what if are just the foundation that is laid. And then the what if that you come up with is sort of building on that. So you'll just have a pillar of what ifs in this area, and in another area, in another area, but it's still that same sort of formula that you approach with. And so the misconceptions of interdisciplinary approaches, though, is that you often aren't inventing things. You like an innovator, it, an innovator can be an inventor, but an innovator doesn't have to be an inventor. You're often just redefining how things are used and how you approach things. And that's I think that really rings true for the work that I do, where I don't feel like I've done anything different, or I don't think that I've done anything, sort of life changing. I've just used other tools from other areas and incorporated in an area that just didn't see value in it. And so that's my area of innovation. I call it kit bashing, where you just sort of take things from other things. That's what they used to do to make all like the spaceships and stuff for Star Wars. And so they just sort of take stuff from like different model kits, and then you just like make something new from it. And then that the manifestation of something new is just the idea. It's not necessarily that like unique tangible product. And so this is, it's completely subjective. Don't think that it's this approach or the solutions you come up with are things that can be widely adopted. They're typically very pertinent for the area and industry that you're addressing. And so they could, and I think that because it's so subjective, it provides for a very authentic and unique approach, because it encapsulates your interests, your experiences, your expertise, and it's something that like only you can do in many areas, and it will be really hard to sort of replicate that if uh, you could train it, but it's really hard to replicate that specific approach that you would take. And I think that just speaks to just a lot of us as professionals and academics and creators in general, where you give 20 people a prompt and they'll come up with 20 different variations of it. And so for me, I'm an athlete, a visual artist, and educator. And so for me, like my approach is democratizing, barriers that have excluded Black communities from having access to resources and information. And so that lends me to exploring things through a community-based approach that is scalable. But if you're not an artist, you're not Black, you're not an athlete, you'll have a different approach to these problems. And so that's how you'll sort of see varying degrees of it. And so that's why it becomes so subjective, because I have a personal experience and I have personal expertise, then it lends to a different result than what somebody that doesn't look like me or doesn't have the same expertise as me would have. And so with that, I mean, there's no right way to to approach a problem, but there is a way for you to approach a problem and find a solution. And I guess I should have like underlined and bolded and capitalized you, because like that is, it's really focused on like you as a person and as a creator and as somebody that's addressing a problem. Um, and that's just because like you have a personal experience with it, and it's authentic, and it's something that has impacted your life. I would argue that it's really hard for you to approach a problem authentically through an interdisciplinary approach if you don't have a personal connection to it. And so I think that there's ways around that, but it's really difficult because you can't remove the person from the problem solving, if that makes sense. And then more importantly, like you have to be open to exploring new possibilities, right? Like you could be the best person for addressing the problem, but if you are still trying to compartmentalize the approach, the areas in which you want to integrate for the approach, then often that you're shooting yourself in the foot in many ways, and you don't want to do that either. And so for me, I sort of see life as just um, an area that's full of problems that are just looking for solutions. And I think that rings true for a lot of people. And if you've just been paying attention to all the stuff in COVID, literally life just says, here's a problem, figure out a solution for it, right? Like that's pretty much how it works. And so from there, it for me, I've just sort of navigated my life in the past 5-6 years, trying to address problems and then using those problems as learning experiences to inform my next area or approach opportunities in life. And so my first problem that I explored, uh, uh, I was a football player. I had 2 hip surgeries, and then I ended up returning back to football. But prior to that, I got to explore art as sort of a creative avenue. I was a big fan of the Boondocks, and so I essentially just wanted to recreate the Boondocks. And I quickly learned that being an animator is definitely a tumultuous thing, and it's not something you could just learn in a couple of months. And but what I did is I learned how to make comics, and I learned how to express myself visually. So when I returned to the football field, I ended up getting into a master's program at Oregon State. And so I had 2 years to play college football, and I also had I essentially was a grad student, and so I was one of the very unique, fortunate and unique people in the NCAA when I was playing to essentially be going after a master's degree and also going after the NFL at the same time. And so with that, I saw that, because I stood out, I stood out in many areas, and I was often the only Black person, often the only athlete in a lot of the classes and in conversations that I was having. And then I was sort of confronted with that stereotype of like what a Black athlete looks like and what they do at schools, particularly predominantly white schools. And so for me, I just started looking at like, why is it that Black athletes in revenue generated sports, so football and basketball, are more likely to succeed on the field and go to the NFL, but they're less likely to go into graduate programs. And so my connection was I was a Division I athlete at a predominantly white institution, and the experiences that I had hindered me from navigating both in a seamless way. And so the insights that I had was that I played college football for 6 years, and I went to two different schools playing, and I was also a grad student. So I lived those actual experiences that I was trying to see in other people, and then those accomplishments that I had were hip surgery and playing football, and then because of the art, I had like popular YouTube videos and stuff like that, which created other problems because of the NCAA. But it allowed me to sort of branch out into other ways. And so my what if was really I didn't really know what a what if was. And so this is what I was really exploring for my time at Oregon State. And from that, I also say that like my graduate program was an interdisciplinary studies graduate program, and we're also trying to figure out what interdisciplinary studies was. And so I remember the second, like my fourth or fifth term, we were still sitting in class like we don't know what the heck this is, but we'll just keep doing it, right? And so from there, I came up with some solutions, and those solutions were varied, and they really spoke to the things that like I was interested in and was able to create. And so first, I created a graphic novel called No Love for Gladiators, put it on Kickstarter, was able to self-publish it. From there, I ended up working on a documentary called The Business of Amateurs, which essentially is like the topics in my graphic novel, but exploring it through a long form storytelling. And so like a 2-3 hour documentary. And then from there, because I was in animation, I made a 2-minute like animated sequence that sort of talked about just the pipeline that athletes go through just to get through the system and then just get thrown away at the end. And so what happened with that is just working on those three things sort of one after another. Ended up getting featured on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. So if anybody like goes to his like NCAA rant, just type in John Oliver NCAA, you'll see that like my documentary was referenced and stuff like that. So got some like HBO credits from that, and then I also spoke to went on a speaking engagements and stuff. So I spoke to my old. I apologize. There's a train that likes to be obnoxious during tumultuous times in my life, and so try to disregard that. But I spoke on many things that at different colleges about just like what it's like to be an athlete and going beyond what those stereotypes are. And so with it, like many of the things that I created really just like built on themselves naturally. And it's not really things I sort of like hope to. It's just interesting, like they all just sort of happened organically. I didn't really seek them out specifically, but I sought out the idea of a solution and tried to address it and became open to different possibilities. And so another one that I had was, when I finished playing, I was like, man, like representation for in cartoons and comics just wasn't there for in terms of Black representation. And so, you know, I didn't see a lot of stuff that I grew up with on screen anymore. And but I knew that like people like me wanted to see themselves in their popular characters. So I knew that like my creative works really can spark conversations. And so what I did is I created this series called Black Superheroes Matter or Black Heroes Matter, and just took my favorite cartoon characters, favorite heroes, and redefined them through children of color. That ended up, you know, getting waves and, you know, a whole bunch of different things happening at like Comic-Con in terms of representation. But when I started this project, like there wasn't anything out, right? Like there wasn't Black Panther, there wasn't any of these things to go against the narrative that Black representation doesn't matter. And so from there, I ended up being the first person to like publish stuff under that banner, and then sort of the whole wave of creators and blurs and all that sort of followed after that. And so that's been a very interesting thing, and more importantly, it's using it's really using culture as a technology to address certain problems. And so often the technology that you use uh, doesn't even need to have X, you know, ones and zeros. It could just be just the ideas and the manifestation of the ideas and the processes which you approach things. And so for me, you know, like because I'm going to medical school, one of the things that was trending obviously because of last year and what's happening now is the disparities of Black patients in the field of medicine. And that's because there's not a lot of you know, the problems that we see are just based on just disparities and, you know, white supremacy in many ways. And so one of the problems that I'm sort of aware of, and hopefully many of you are aware of, is that, you know, medical students and residents, which lead on to be doctors, believe inaccurate things about Black patients. And so, you know, that could be just Black people age slower than whites, you know, Black people's blood coagulates more quickly, whites have larger brains, Blacks have thicker skin, um, you know, Black people have stronger immune systems, and all these different things that perpetuate the problems that we see in lack of equitable care. And so for me, that when I have navigated these spaces, often I'm the only Black person in that space. And because I'm the only Black person, I have to actually, you know, share and talk about things and explain things in a unique way. And so what I do is, you know, my what if was, what if I created experiences to for people to learn about Black bodies and see that they aren't any different. And so what I did is I essentially created um, I created an AR experience. And so this is a way for me to not only be able to put a Black person in the home of somebody with darker skin, but also allow you to peel away the layers of the skin to go down to the bones, go down to the brain, go down to all these different things, and literally see that Black people are no different. And you could scale it up, you could gamify it, you could do all these different things. But the beauty of it is that you know, this can be a very personal way to explore these various topics without having to, you know, be essentially without having to subject yourselves to the, you know, the public realities, right? Like you peel away some, you know, a Black model skin, and you're able to explore it and investigate it in ways that provide for very deep connections. And immersive technology in many ways has the power to do that uh, because one, there's a sort of flashy allure to it, but and more importantly, like these are actually engaging things. You actually have to take specific actions to get an end result. And if you don't take those actions, then you won't get the insights that come from those actions. So I think I'll fast forward it because one of the things that I really enjoy is let me see if I yeah. So one of the things that I really enjoy is animation. And so being able to open up the skull and do that, like in mixed reality, like that was just fun. I was just like, I can incorporate animation, I can incorporate 3D models, I can incorporate user experiences, I can incorporate game mechanics. Uh, but that's just because I have the background in it, right? Uh, and so because I learned all that stuff to address that very specific problem and create that experience, I can now I have the skills and I can do other stuff with it. But the journey of approaching that problem naturally and organically, I didn't set out to learn how to code. I set out to solve a problem. And through that problem, I learned how to code. I learned how to build all these different things and create that experience. And I think that that's something that we do foundationally in school, but it's not explicitly expressed in that way. And so because it's not explicitly expressed in that way, if you just start, go for an end goal and then start to pick up new skills along the way, you tend to just pick up skills and then compartmentalize that. And then you have to untrain yourself to use those skills in other areas. This is just sort of flipping it on its head to where like, you don't need to know everything. You just need to know enough to just get the job done. And that's what the problems care about. The problems care about just finding a solution, not necessarily how you found it, just that it exists and it makes sense. And so another one is just the fact that, Black children often fare below the reading level, and that perpetuates a lot of the things that we see in disparities in education. And for me, my connection to that was, I remember in 10th grade, my English teacher said that we had to have book reports, and I dreaded that because I just avoid reading because I was nervous every time I read in public, and it was just something that like was really hard to get over. And so he introduced me to graphic novels, and that really opened the doors to like what reading was for me. And so those insights that I had was that like I know many Black people that don't like picking up books, but they will watch Japanese anime and read the mess out of some subtitles. And so they'll read, they have the capacity to read, and they will read. It's just that you have to frame it in a different way. And so what if, so for me, what if I created books that allowed, essentially, what if I created books that allowed you to have that experience of motion and everything that's attractive, but at the end of the day, you're able to, essentially read subtitles of a book. So what if you watched a book, right? And what if you're able to interact with it and stuff like that, to where at the end of the day, you are, able to essentially have the words pop off the page and listen with sound and see it with motion. And so the idea that I essentially explored was, taking a book and letting it come to life with sound and motion, so that you can watch it, you could read it, you could listen to it, and you could even interact with the characters and play with it. And so that not only adds value to the book, which then in turn has more Black kids picking up books rather than turning on a TV screen, because they could have a better experience with a book than a TV screen. And again, like this is all stuff that, stems from a lot of the work that I've already done. And then obviously what people are calling the Portland experiment, which is essentially, me taking during the summertime, me taking a 3D model of George Floyd and then going to create an AR experience, an AR app, and then going to like just many hotspots around Portland during like the heat of the moment, and actually going through and doing like 30-foot installations of that bust in hotspots, and then taking pictures and videos. And so what I did with that is, the reason I approached it that way is because, one, the feds were out here and they were like snatching people up like 5 blocks away from me. And so that was like super scary to do. Two, I'm Black in Portland, so like all those things that are happening with me, I want to be able to participate. But I also am trying to go into medical school, so I can't get arrested. And there are many people getting arrested. And then 3, I did not want to get sick. I grew up with a lung infection for like 12 years of my life. And so when I heard that, some of the symptoms were like pneumonia, that was the last thing I wanted to do, because I thought that I like got over that. And so I know I'll be subjected to that type of stuff. And so the goal for me in this situation was, how can I make something that's impactful, make something that allows me to explore my creativity and allows me to leave an impact. And interestingly enough, the movement that we saw last year probably would not have existed to the way that it did if we didn't have smartphones. And so I saw that the power of a smartphone, because most of us saw the videos and everything through Twitter, through YouTube, through our phones. And so if you harness the power of the phone and you create these experiences and you share those with the world, then they'll share those and they will see that those things actually existed. And so I didn't have to go through to do all I needed was a computer and an idea. You know, with if I would have had to make a 30-foot statue and install it, I would have had to get a permit. I would have had to like navigate just like, you know, racist institutions. I would have had to like duck and dodge the Proud Boys. I would have had to do all those different things just to get that experience, only to probably have it getting taken down like 30 seconds later. And so with this lives on forever and nobody could do anything to it because it's not tangible, but it still exists because there's pictures and videos of it. And there's people walking around it and interacting with it. And so so the power of technology in this area was really insightful because I posted those pictures online. The worst thing somebody could have said was, oh, I hate it, or they'll say some, you know, racist joke about George Floyd, but that's it. They couldn't do anything about it, right? Like that, and that's the power of it. It allows you to mitigate those realities that are associated and have been associated with this expressing things about the plight of Black Americans. And so this, you know, this experience really showed me how you can democratize ideas and activism in ways that essentially decentralize things. And so you could take away my computer, you could take away, you know, my access to the internet, but you can't take away the pictures and stuff that exist on the internet. You know, like God forbid it goes on the blockchain, then it's on forever, right? Like it's and that's the power of innovation is being able to address problems that have very real consequences and mitigating those consequences by taking nuanced and interdisciplinary approaches, right? Like this project required me to know how to find stuff on the internet. It required me to, you know how to build an AR app. It required me to learn how to do a little bit of code, maybe some 3D modeling. But at the end of the day, like I didn't want to just make 3D models. I wanted to create an experience. And that experience was to address a specific problem. And so from there, I started to explore just innovations in storytelling about Black issues. And so what that meant is I wanted to express myself and express myself in books and use those books to sort of harness the power of creativity and harness the media in it. And so the way AR works and the way AR works, at least, you know, in the work that I do, like I create images and then those images essentially act as QR codes so that I can parent animation and other digital assets to it. And so because the images are unique in nature, I'm able to essentially have a picture be a QR code for a collection of different things. And so what I did is I just made a whole magazine full of QR code based illustrations and pages. And then I had unique experiences that go from one page to the next. And so it was a matter of just the book cover saying that Black Lives Matter and people sort of chanting and bringing that sort of like group community crowd activism thing to literally like the palm of your hand. And then also talking about animation, how you know different institutions perpetuated a lot of things that affected Black and Brown communities during COVID. And you know, even from there, like even to the point where I created a 3D model of the editor who's part of this Black owned company, and you could just walk in the shoes of the editor, you know, as a Black man in America by using AR, you know, with a 3D model and game mechanics and stuff. And so it's really allowed you to explore these things and innovate just because you're just trying to see like, what if, you know, what if I just did this? You know, what would that look like? What would that approach be? And so for me, it's you know, animation, and like for me, AR and technology is a way for me to share animation that goes beyond just getting a movie deal or making a YouTube video. It's about adding motion and sound and bringing life to ideas that you can engage with more than one sense. And so for me, you know, like that my whole thing is just going out in the world and just like creating opportunities to overcome adversity. And hopefully through overcoming that adversity, you're able to conquer those things that have often hindered people, that are in the margins from, just living their best lives. And so hopefully this was insightful. Hopefully this helped. Hopefully I was able to give you a little bit of a journey of the stuff that I do. And hopefully like you follow along with the stuff that I'm continuing to do, or sharing the stuff that you're doing. Because for me, I'm always on Twitter. I'm always on all these things to learn from others, and I think just sort of having that community mindset is what really gets us through all these things. And so the idea of like trade secrets and all that within reason, right? Like trade secrets for ideas and approaches uh, are are things that should be democratized, because that's how things get better.
Thank you so much, Stephen. That was awesome. I'd like to take some questions now. You're either welcome to unmute yourself and ask, or you can also put them in the chat and we will read them.
So did you say your background in college was animation?
Nope, I literally learned how to animate after I had my second hip surgery. So I am a byproduct of YouTube University.
Yeah, my question was how to teach yourself the skills to just start doing things with AR or VR, things like that, especially if you don't have a background in animation.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I always sort of go down these rabbit holes with, especially last year because I had just the time. And so for those that had the time, it's really one, finding people that are like doing things that you want to know how to do, and just talking to them and just sort of picking their brain. And then the second thing is just a quick Google search on YouTube of just how to animate or how to do AR. That has gotten me a lot further than any sort of approach that I've ever taken. And so with comics and animation, what the thing that I did is I went to Borders Books when that existed, and I got this book called How to Animate for Teens, and I just read that book and did everything that that book said do, and then from there, it gave me the confidence to just start experimenting with things. And so I would say that if you're looking to be efficient with your time, um, take a course because it will give you the direction, more of a direction from an expert. But if you're just looking to explore and see where it goes, just go down just a bunch of rabbit holes, and just try to just make little milestones here and there.
Cool, thank you.
I have a question. I relate a lot to the sort of multidisciplinary aspect of your talk. My question is about how do you avoid spreading yourself too thin if you have a lot of different ideas in a lot of different areas? How do you avoid that sort of thing?
Yeah, so that is something that I struggle with on a regular basis. I think this is my board of processes and ideas right there. And so whenever I'm in like a Zoom call, that's always in the background. And so people are always curious to see like why I do that. And that is to manage what I need to prioritize. And so that's why I said, trying to putting things in boxes really causes a lot of stress because it doesn't allow you to step outside and just think about things holistically. Because in many areas, I think, particularly for like my AR work, the AR portion of my work probably takes like 30 minutes to do. The other elements of it take days, if not weeks, if not years, right? Like the book that I worked on that for a whole year. but the AR part of it, I put that together in like 2 weeks, you know? But that's just because you have to prioritize what the real things are needed for the problem. And so I would say there's a way to look at things from a multidisciplinary approach, but that multidisciplinary approach is just saying, I have a whole bunch of boxes here that I could do things in. An interdisciplinary approach says, I have a list of things, a list of variety of skills that I could pull from. And so it doesn't have boxes in interdisciplinary approaches, but it does have boxes in multidisciplinary approaches. And so for me as a creator, I found that it's really difficult to find a job, you know, if I just want to work for somebody, because it'll be like, what do you do and how can you help us? And it's like, well, I could do a whole bunch of things. What is the problem? And that doesn't really work well when you're trying to get a job, where they're just like, you know, like you want to be more specific with it. And so it's a, you know, good luck on the journey because it can be frustrating, and my girlfriend can attest to how frustrated I will become if in certain situations.
Thank you.
If I can go next, maybe. Stephen, thank you so much. This was such an insightful talk. There were many things that will stick in my mind. I mean, I love the way how you define Afrofuturism, interdisciplinary and innovation, and then related them. I also love the what if question. To me, that's a question of hope, especially in difficult times and for difficult problems. Thank you for all of that. I also like your formulaic approach. I'm an engineer. I like to formulate things and how you define the problem. But one of the aspects I wanted to ask about is you formulated it essentially from a personal standpoint. But one of the things we are actually trying to work with our students is things like teamwork and collaboration. So in your mind, how does that play into problem solving? Can you share experiences where collaboration and teamwork worked well or did not work well? And what are your recommendations to our students on that aspect?
Yeah, definitely. I would say teamwork is that I always use teamwork and community interchangeably. And so anything that I mention when it comes to community, that's essentially referencing teamwork, because that ultimately says that one person has the capacity to do a lot of things, but they don't have the capacity to do everything. And so I always try to get the ball rolling, and then I try to find collaborators to help me with these things that would often take me weeks, if not years, to complete. Somebody that has been working as a sound designer for 30 years will be a lot more efficient in working with sound than me, who has to learn some YouTube videos to stitch some stuff together. And so I forgot to put one of the projects that I had in the deck, but I finished an AR mural in Portland for this nonprofit called Self Enhancement Incorporated. And the goal that they wanted was they wanted to create. They had this mural, this like 20-foot mural of 6 Black inventors that have influenced modern day society. And they turned them into sort of superheroes. So it was sort of a Black history superhero sort of mural, right? And what they wanted to do was they wanted to enhance or incorporate, make the experience more immersive. And so they wanted to have sound, they wanted to have voiceovers of like the actual characters and what they did so that they share the backstories. They also wanted to have some visualization of their actual superpowers. And they wanted to just sort of create this well-rounded experience that attached to the actual physical mural. So you actually had to go to the mural to actually experience this, opposed to just sending a video out, right? And so it creates a unique experience that is more impactful, and you'll remember the things from it because of just a variety of different things that they've done a lot of studies on. But what I did is I started in terms of Black creators or Blackness in AR in Portland. I started that, right? From the stuff that I did in back over the summertime, I sort of made, I set laid the groundwork to say like, oh, okay, if you want to explore Blackness with AR, you can, and I could help you do that. And so I sort of laid the groundwork for that, which allowed them to sort of start to think about that as a team. And so when they reached out to me, they said, we have sound design, we have this vision, we want to do this, we want to work with you to bring all that together for the community. And so I ended up working with the illustrator that did the mural to help sort of come up with the ideas. I worked with 2 sound designers and a producer to work with like the sound, so that there was a soundtrack, and also a writer that that allowed them to tell the stories, and a narrator that was also one of the producers. And then we also work with like some community creators to actually install another mural on the side of the building, so that people could actually go to the building in multiple locations to have that experience. And so I think it was a team of like 10 or 11. At the end of the day, like I was still responsible for like, you know, it coming together and coming to life, but being able to delegate and collaborate with other people to make the experience unique, that was just a byproduct of teamwork. You know, so the innovation came from showing people that this is a possibility, and then the collaboration, the teamwork is making that product and making that product come to life in the real world for others to experience. And so often for me, like I'm always looking to work with other people. It just so happens that like I don't know many people that like can do the things that like I want to do. But whenever I do, I'm always hitting them up saying like, hey, this would be great in AR. Hey, we should do this or explore these different things. Hey, let's collaborate on a project. I'm always doing that. And it's because I think that makes for lasting and impactful work that inspires other people to do more lasting and impactful work.
Thank you.
I have a question about challenges that you encounter in trying to integrate art and technology and trying to make a living out of your activity. Can you talk a little bit about that, especially thinking of people who may want to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah. So my girlfriend will attest to the fact that I have very difficult time valuing or putting value to the work that I do. And so, and I think it irritates her more because I spend a whole lot of time working on things, and that doesn't translate to actual dollars sometimes. But I think that it is a conversation for me as a creator. It's a conversation of what value do I think other people see in the work that I do, and so it's until I address that question of like, one, do people even find value in this work? Am I just doing this for therapy? That is something that you have to address first. Because if you're doing something for therapy, you don't care what the value is, what it does for you. But when you're doing sort of work that's public facing, doing stuff for a career, you have to see like, what are the skills that people are actually paying me for, and what is the value of the creative work that comes from those skills. And I think every project that I do, in one way or another, like every project that I do is a way for me to level up my creative skills. And with that, every project that I complete means that my price goes up for that particular area. And so it's, I think, figure out what you need to do to pay bills, and then from there, see how far you can push the envelope. And then for those experimental projects, just reach out to people for speculative things. Perfect example is there's this company or this pizza place that I love in Portland called Sizzle Pie. And so I created the AR mural, and I created a whole bunch of different videos. And I said, hey, like from that, I have an idea of like how much it's going to cost for me to like recreate that stuff. And then I just essentially just made a little like one-sheeter and sent it to them and said, hey, I think that, this project that I just completed, I think, looking at this, let me know what you think. And if you want to collaborate on something like this, let's set up a time to chat. And then from there, it allows you to, when you have something that they can reference, that shows that you have the possibilities for it, which gets their mind rolling. And then from there, you'll see if they're really interested in it, then that will allow you to possibly pay more bills, right? And get more pub and get more stuff. And so it, in a roundabout way, it's, you know, create stuff, put yourself out there. Don't think that it's going to happen overnight, but you can be strategic in how you position your projects, to where many of you probably don't know that I've only been in the AR space for 15 months. You know, I started December 2019. That is when I first opened up Unity. That's when I first put out my first app. Well, no, I did my first test. I put out my first app January 2020, and then I put out the second version of the app in March 2020, and then I released my second app in September 2020. And so it's like, I'm fresh to the scene, but what I've done is I've approached things strategically, because the things that I learned from football is that you put things on tape, you do things in a game, you put them on tape, and then you send them to schools. And then if people like what they see on tape, then they'll reach out to you with opportunities. And so just approaching it that way, it's like, I have no problem just saying like, oh yeah, I worked on this project, and I'll share it with 100 people. And then if, 30 people say, oh yeah, stop sharing it with me, then I'll just find another 100 people to share it with. And then you just kind of go from there. But really it's a matter of like, are you doing something that you think other people would have value in, or are you doing something that is just for you for therapy? And they could be both, right? Like, there's plenty of projects that I get stressed out about, and it's like, I'm gonna just do this and just play around with it just because it just makes me feel good, right? And then hopefully you can make some money off of it.
Hi, Stephen. Yeah, thanks again. This is a really neat perspective. Thanks for your talk. So really quick, couple specifics on your project that you did in Portland. What was the platform that others could view your stuff through? Was it just through smartphones and apps, or were there like headsets that were provided in some way? And then along the lines of AR headsets, that's tech I'm interested in working on. What things, like what would make it more useful for content creators? Like what are things you see lacking in current technology that would be, what are improvements you would like to see in that space?
Yeah, so I'll try to address both of those, which is interesting, because both of those areas are just like areas that like I am really interested in. And so for the Portland project, that project was, the focus of that was to teach Black people how to express their activism using technology. And so it's a lot of the AR stuff that you see out and available, if it's not like a speculative thing, like if it's not like a test video that somebody made in After Effects, it's often going to be mobile based or smartphone based, just because like that's really the only way you could access it. And there's web AR where you could access, you don't have to download an app, or there's app based stuff for social media stuff, but everything is really much smartphones at this point. VR is a little different, just because you have the Oculus Quest and all that stuff, but like XR is really dependent on hardware, and that's the limitation. And so with the George Floyd experience I did in Portland, I created the app, and so if you have an Android phone, you could sort of download the app and play around with it. It's not available in the App Store because I didn't want to pay for anything to get it on the App Store. But if you have an iPhone, they really made it difficult to share apps and share AR experiences that aren't necessarily in their pipeline. And I think it's because of, they're getting away from the areas of like jailbreaking, if you ever like follow that. Because of like the whole jailbreaking community, they've really like buckled down on what you could do in terms of sharing creations on Apple's platforms. But with it, the way around that was I could use this as a teaching tool to empower other creators to create these very things. And so as long as you have a computer and you have just the desire to make something, you can make it. You can make something that you own and that you control for your, like, on your phone. And so not only did I have the experience, but I also had like the walkthrough of what every single thing that I did to create this experience, and I just put it out there for free because you know, the stuff that I use were just available for free already. So as long as you have a computer and an idea, you don't have to pay any money to create this experience and pick up some skills along the way. And so that was what that was. And then and from there, I really started to explore, like, okay, how do I make things more accessible and how do I make things more immersive, right? When it comes to books, the problem with AR books and the problem that, like, you know, people are starting to see is that in order for you to experience an AR book or anything AR, you have to hold your phone in one hand, and then you have to hold the book in another hand. And I don't know if you ever tried to read a book by just holding it with one hand and another hand behind your back. It's really, really difficult to hold it and also turn a page and also see all the stuff. God forbid you actually have you have a graphic novel where you have a double page spread and you're trying to see the whole artwork. You can't do that, right? And so yes, AR has the power to add, you know, animation and bring the pages to life, but the practical use of it isn't really a thing if you don't have three hands, right? If you don't have three arms and having one hand over it, it's really difficult. And so what I started looking at is how do you have an AR headset or a companion that you could utilize with a phone, very much like a Google Cardboard, right? And so Google Cardboard sort of made things more accessible because we had smartphones. It's not necessarily the case with AR, with augmented reality, because it's not stereoscopic, so you don't have sort of like the two eye holes. You actually have a full screen view, and there aren't really any headsets that you could utilize that for. And you could go with the HoloLens. The only problem is that you have to develop specifically for a HoloLens, and you have to develop specifically for these headsets. You're using the same tools, but you have to develop specifically for them. With smartphones, you can create an app for iPhone and iOS, and it goes to a variety of different devices. And so what I've been exploring is essentially, this is a prototype, but like essentially creating a headset where you put the phone in here, and then you put the headset on, and then you're able to, because it's made out of cardboard, it's going to be lighter, it's going to be cheaper, and because we all have $1,000 phones, right? Like iPhones have LiDAR at this point, right? So you invest in the phone and you utilize iPhone's marketing and Samsung's marketing, and you essentially create a companion set that allows you to have these comparable experiences. And so it's in many ways, like, we're starting to see a trend with independent developers that go away from like the headset, you know, approach, the enterprise approach, you know, so that you don't have to buy $3,500 headset. But then if you do go that route, understand that like you're going to be inaccessible to people that you probably want to serve. And so we're starting to see trends. We're starting to see Kickstarter projects and independent developers addressing these problems, but the industry in and of itself has really been focused on enterprise solutions. And so when you think of headsets, you think about like Apple glasses, which are going to cost $300-400. You think about, you know, the Unreal, which costs $500. You think about Magic Leap, which costs $3,000. HoloLens, which costs another $3,500. You know, like, who's going to afford that, right? Like, and then who's going to develop for it if you have to specifically make it for that device, you know? And so tools like Unity and stuff like that make it easy, but you know, this is something I've just been putting together with duct taping and cardboard, right, over the past, like, you know, year or so. And I'm seeing that there's hurdles you have to do to overcome, like bringing these types of things to market, but also that the market is really bare because there's so much focus on those enterprise solutions. that nobody really cares about. You know, you walk into a company and say, hey, I want to do something for a smartphone with the cardboard headset, and people will laugh at you because they're like, that's not going to make any money. It will if you sell 1 million copies of the headset. Then it's like, you know, then it makes some money, you know. So it's one of the current trends right now. Pretty passionate about it.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So we're coming up on time. I just wanted to thank you again for joining us this morning. We're very grateful to have learned more about your work. I especially really appreciated hearing you break down your creative process. And I think like in science and working with data, you know, there's a lot of discussion about being not really embracing the subjective or your personal identity or all of that. And I think that that's definitely worth considering, and it leads us to ask new questions and new possibilities. So I really appreciate that. I also appreciated learning more about your own learning process. As someone who's learning Unity and Blender, I heard you in another presentation say that you really have to want to learn these technologies. It can't just be like a passing fancy. And I think that's so true. So thank you again. And for those of you who would like to continue following Stephen's work, I posted his website and Twitter handle in the chat. And we also have a couple more events for this series that go through March and they're into April. So stay tuned for those. They're on the Studio X website. And thanks just for joining us today, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you, Stephen.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Stephen.
You too.